Welcome to the Illuminate Universe podcast, The Cast. Get it? The Cast? My name is Alina, and I'm the founder of Illuminate, where we mentor job seekers and help employers to fast-track their business goals. I interview a celebrity cast of incredible individuals who have truly inspiring careers. We're talking about their work journey, the process of taking the leap to create a life and career they love, and what happens when they push aside their fears and doubts to unleash their fullest potential. Today, we speak with James Ed, who obtained a Master's of Education from Harvard's Graduate School of Education, and who is currently an HR training and development manager at a unicorn biotech company that has raised over 20 million USD recently in Series D. Our first question for you is, how did your post-secondary experience lead you to where you are today? Tell us about getting into Harvard Graduate School of Education and how that led you to where you are today in the education industry.
Great. Well, first, thank you for having me on your podcast, your video cast, and glad to be here. Now, for my post-secondary experience, I want to go back to my undergrad experience because I went to university in the United States and went to a military college, something not many people do. I believe for private military colleges, 0.1% of people, at least in the US area, attend one of these small colleges. So at that school, I learned a ton. I learned about grit, which has become a buzzword now in all markets. But before it was, I learned about grit, about suffering, and how to be positive and get through challenging situations with a group of men and women who are like-minded. Now, from that experience or during that experience, I learned a lot about education as well by amalgamating the military lifestyle and the passion for learning that I discovered while there. I decided after that, I needed to get into education in some capacity. That led me overseas, where I did a lot of education and education policy work in conflict zones, in war zones. And e-learning was always a big thing pre-pandemic in conflict zones, because, in a conflict zone, there might be roads shut down due to violence. There might be school closures due to conflict. And that's where I ended up, or how I ended up in e-learning. Now, in between a couple terms or stints overseas, I applied to do my master's at Harvard in education and education policy, a little bit of a focus on ed tech. And I suggest everyone who's very passionate about the transfer of knowledge, about the science and art of education and how it impacts, individuals on a small scale, but, the entire globe. If you want to talk about international education policy, I advise everyone to submit an application. For me, I had a great network of people who wrote recommendations from across the world in some of these areas, specifically the Middle East. But I submitted an application, skipped graduation, and was on a plane before the graduation ceremony heading back to Baghdad to work. So that's, I hope that answers the question, or the two questions that you asked.
I love it. And I have a follow-up question for you. What is your why for going into education?
Great. Now, that's a great question. I think everyone should ask that question to themselves, regardless of what industry or job position they pursue. For me, it goes back to that transmission of knowledge. I find myself quite didactic in nature, but I think that sharing and receiving knowledge is the best feeling. And I think it's as close to true happiness as many can get. And I learned that early on, and that was my passion. And there was no better way or industry to get to manifest that passion so often than in the education world.
I absolutely echo the same values as you, which is why whenever we have our conversations, I'm always so energized and just happy. The exchange of knowledge that's happening, and I get to learn from you about things that I have never even considered before. And that's just new knowledge. And I think that's the most motivating part for me. And also because you're my friend. So that's fun. Okay. Well, now my second question for you is, what are the main traits and skills someone aspiring to enter the education industry and mega startup unicorn world should develop?
preschooling, secondary education. But I'll go back to grit. And again, it's become such a buzzword in many markets now, but being able to grind through so many different jobs. When you're at a startup, you're wearing multiple hats. When I came in, I'm at a company now where we are a unicorn. We are a $1 billion plus valued company. But when I joined the company early on, I had to do much more than just develop e-learning. I had to build simulations, custom simulations for clients and some in-house work. I had to do in-person virtual ed training. And even some marketing and website development. So, I'd suggest grit, or kind of define that value as one that's a really important value for those entering the startup space. And that's only because you have to do so many things, and you have to get through seriously difficult situations, whether it be with people, a product, a service, or all of them together.
Absolutely. And I think adaptability is one of the key skills that everyone should develop, because the only constant that we have in today's business landscape is change. Change happens every day. Change happens everywhere. So how would you recommend someone who perhaps doesn't necessarily like the idea of change to be open and to be adaptable?
Oh, that's a difficult question, honestly. I mean, that would I would have to ask actually people who focus in change leadership, but to get you a better, more accurate answer. However, from the corporate learning and development space, I'm biased, but I do think I think there is a way to teach people to shift their mindset. And for that type of behavioral shift, I always suggest cohort-based education. So not necessarily self-paced, on a computer or on your mobile tablet. I always suggest learning, whether it be online or offline, in a group. And I think in a group, there's so many different things people learn, soft skills about themselves and others. And, when you do throw some of those challenges in that group setting, the cohort-based learning setting, you start to see positive change, in many cases, for the better.
I think it's easier to change when you're changing with a group of people. The most scary thing about change is perhaps feeling alone, feeling like you're alone in this change. So can you tell us a bit more about cohort learning? Why is that important?
For sure. I mean, you said it. And talking about feeling lonely, you're an entrepreneur, right? Entrepreneurship can be very lonely at times. However, startup world, when you're on a team, you have that opportunity to learn and gain skills and knowledge, but in the market sense, applicable skills in that group. Now, cohort learning is the idea of learning in a group, a cohort. And one of the great things about it is that there's an added layer of interactivity when you compare it to typical e-learning, whether it be through simulations, again, self-paced, mobile, tablet, desktop. You have this added element, and it's massive, the ability to, on the fly, interact with others and react to what information and skills you are acquiring, react with others present. That communal feeling, as a result, leads to conversation that in many ways regurgitates what you're learning. You're actually teaching each other. And the conversations, the organic conversations that come from that in the learning experience are very important to the information or skills retention.
I love it. And one thing that just came to mind is sometimes navigating change in our careers can also be very scary, whether that be jumping into a new job or upskilling. I think the concept of cohort learning can also be applied here, where our learners reach out or even build their own personal network of advisors. For example, I have an amazing network of advisors who can navigate that change with you and echo the same learning reflections, share insights, share knowledge, which again elevates that happiness that we talked about earlier as well. Sure. I think that's energizing and moves us all forward. So my last question for you, James, is given the interesting times that we're in, what is one piece of advice you would offer to someone currently striving to attain their dream job?
Well, that's a really good question. Another great question. And a tough one, to be honest, but from my experience and the fact that I didn't go the normal route, entering conflict zones, war zones, dangerous areas, and starting my career out that way and transitioning into the private sector here gives me, I guess, a different an angle, or maybe I had a different perspective to start with, throughout the process. But I always tell people to network, but not network in the typical way that you see it, whether it be in the airport book or in one of the smaller TED Talks at a TEDx event. I always tell people, go to a networking event and don't ask people where they're from or where they went to school. Ask people what they like to do. And you'll find that the real good connections you make, mutually beneficial connections, are with people that have the same hobby, that are actually very passionate outside of the 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 if you're in a startup, or sometimes, but outside of those normal working hours, right? Outside, they have this weird, unique hobby or fascination, this level of curiosity that picks when you talk to them about that. So I always suggest go to networking events and talk with people about what they like to do. Disregard the college brand or the business brand. Don't worry if you don't work at a unicorn. That's not important, because when you build connections, they have to be meaningful. And as a result, the more meaning as a result, you have these mutually beneficial connection that could last a lifetime. So not the typical answer, but it's what I suggest people do. And I've done it, and it's helped me a lot. And I've made long lasting friendships with people from all walks of life.
Oh, I have so much to add about the topics of networking. I think networking has really served me well in my career as well, from attaining my dream job at IBM, at Deloitte as a university student, and then exiting Deloitte to work on Illuminate full time. There was also networking involved in between. Let's just say networking was a key step in between every single move that I took. And one thing I wanted to add is networking is about being genuine, right? Like you said, it's about building that real personal connection, leaving an impression that matters. And sometimes the best questions to ask are the ones that are unexpected, where you make people remember you and be curious about who you are as an individual outside of this whole, networking session taking place, outside of your professional image, and take that relationship to the next level, perhaps to a friendship or to mentorship, and ultimately have this person be willing to vouch for you, whether that be through a reference to a job, or to recommend you, or to even just help you and assist you in your journey of growth. So I absolutely echo the same values when it comes to networking as well. And James, it is such a pleasure to have you on our podcast, and we hope to have you back in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Alina, for discussing, and I totally agree with you in the networking from the networking aspect. And it's one of the reasons, your passion for education caught my attention, and we've become close friends, and we're working together. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to answer your questions. It's been great.
Likewise. See you next time.